Have you ever really stopped to think about how nature just works? It's this amazing tangled web where everything is connected in perfect harmony. Today, we're going to pull on a few of those threads and see what keeps that balance and what happens when just one thing gets moved. Okay, let's start right here. We've got elephants. They're the definition of wild, right? But here they are walking through a farm. So the big question is, why? Why would an animal that belongs in the forest leave its home for a place like this? You can bet this isn't just a random decision. The elephant's journey is actually the very first domino to fall in a really long, really complicated chain reaction. So to get the whole story, we have to figure out what pushed that first domino over. Yeah, it's not just one thing. Imagine your house is slowly running out of food, the water gets turned off, and the walls are literally closing in. That's pretty much what's happening to these elephants. A mix of things like climate change and human construction are squeezing their homes, leaving them with no choice but to search somewhere else to survive. So that elephant story, it shows us that everything is connected. If we really want to get how nature works, we have to understand the basic rules of the game for any environment. It's like we're investigating a scene. We need to figure out who all the players are and what the conditions are on the ground. First up, you've got the abiotic components. The easiest way to think about these, they're all the living characters in our story. The plants, the animals, the fungus, the bacteria, you name it. If it's alive, or was once alive, from a huge elephant to the tiniest microbe, it's an abiotic component. And every story needs a setting, a stage for the action. That's where abiotic components come in. This is all the non-living stuff, the sunlight that gives energy, the water, the dirt, the temperature. These things set the stage and dictate the rules our living characters have to play by. And this is a perfect way to see what we're talking about. A pond and a forest are two totally different stages, right? They have different abiotic factors, like one is full of water, the other gets different sunlight, and because of that, they support completely different castes of biotic characters. You got fish and frogs in one, foxes and rabbits in the other. So, how do all these characters actually interact? Well, it mostly comes down to one thing: food. And the foundation of pretty much every ecosystem are the producers, organisms like grass that are total self-starters. They make their own energy, usually from sunlight. Then that energy gets passed on. It moves to the primary consumers, the herbivores, like this rabbit right here. It gets its energy by munching on that grass. And then the energy moves up the chain again to the secondary consumers. These are carnivores, like this fox, that get their energy by eating the rabbit. So you've got grass to rabbit to fox. Seems like a simple straight line, doesn't it? Well, you've probably guessed it by now, that neat little line. It's a huge oversimplification. Nature's dinner party is a whole lot messier and way more connected than that. This is what it really looks like, a food web. A fox doesn't just eat rabbits, right? It'll eat mice if it can, and a hawk might go after mice and snakes. All those simple, straight food chains start to overlap and crisscross, creating this incredibly complex and amazing web of life. So let's look at a wild, real-world example of this web in action. It's a story that involves a fish, a fly, and a flower, and honestly, the connection between them sounds almost like a riddle. So check this out. Researchers were looking at two ponds. Pond A, over on the left, has fish, and look, the plants around it are covered in flowers. But Pond B, on the right, has no fish and way fewer flowers. Everything else is pretty much the same. So what gives? How on earth can fish in the water have anything to do with flowers on the land? It turns out it's this incredible domino effect. Ready? The fish in Pond A were eating dragonfly larvae living in the water. Fewer larvae meant fewer adult dragonflies could grow up and fly around. And what's a dragonfly's favorite snack? Bees and butterflies. So with fewer dragonflies hunting them, the pollinator population just exploded, which of course led to more flowers getting pollinated and absolutely thriving. And there it is. That's the secret connection. It's just a perfect example of how one creature can have this huge indirect impact on something you'd think is completely separate. The fish and the flower never even meet, but the fish's presence is the secret to the flower's success. It's just a beautiful picture of how the food web works in mysterious ways. Okay, so we've seen how nature has its own delicate balancing act. But that story is also a bit of a warning. What happens when we humans come along and just forcefully knock over a domino that was never, ever supposed to fall? I want you to meet the Indian bullfrog. In its neck of the woods, it plays a super important role. It's a major predator of insects, keeping their numbers from getting out of control. It is a critical piece in its local food web. But back in the 1980s, these frogs became a really popular food export. And because of that one single commercial demand, people started harvesting them on a massive scale. And their populations just plummeted. So after everything we've just talked about with food webs and connections, what do you think happened next? What were the consequences when this key predator was basically yanked out of the puzzle? The fallout was a textbook example of an ecosystem getting thrown completely out of whack. With no frogs to eat them, the populations of insect pests exploded. This forced farmers to use way more chemical pesticides. And those chemicals, well, they poisoned the soil, they polluted the water, and they ended up harming the health of the entire ecosystem, including the people who lived there. That bullfrog story is such a powerful lesson, isn't it? It really teaches us that if we want to maintain nature's harmony, we first have to understand the delicate balance that holds the whole thing together. And that balance is built on all kinds of different relationships. And this gets to a really crucial point. Not every interaction is predator and prey. That balance we're talking about is built on a whole menu of relationships. You have mutualism, where everybody wins, like a bee and a flower. You have commensalism, where one benefits and the other is just fine, totally unaffected. And yeah, you have parasitism, where one benefits by hurting the other. It's this whole spectrum of interactions that creates a truly living, self-regulating system. And that brings us right back to the beginning. From that elephant looking for a new home to the bullfrog that vanished from the fields, we can see just how fragile this whole harmony thing really is. It's why we have protected areas, to try and keep these tangled, amazing systems from falling apart. But the real lesson here isn't just about national parks. It leaves us with a much bigger question. Knowing that every single piece is connected, what's our responsibility in making sure the dominoes don't fall in the first place?